The thunder of hooves pounded against the dusty earth as Clara Mercer raced across the open plains, her heart hammering in her chest faster than her horse's galloping stride. The three men pursuing her were gaining ground, their angry shouts carrying on the hot summer wind of 1875. She'd witnessed what no woman should have seen, the cold-blooded murder of the town banker, and now these men would ensure she never told a soul. Clara glanced over her shoulder, her golden hair whipping across her face. The gunmen were no more than 100 yards behind her now, their horses kicking up clouds of dust against the backdrop of the setting New Mexico sun. The nearest town, Silver Creek, was still miles away, and her mount was tiring quickly. Through tear-blurred vision, she spotted a small homestead in the distance, a modest house, a corral, and what appeared to be a stable. It was her only hope. Clara dug her heels into her horse's sides, urging the exhausted animal forward with desperate determination. As she approached the property, she could hear the men's voices more clearly now, their threats carrying on the wind. Pulling hard on the reins, she guided her horse directly to the stable, practically falling from the saddle as she dismounted. She yanked open the heavy wooden door, leading her heaving horse inside. The stable was dimly lit, with sunlight filtering through the slats in the walls. It smelled of hay, leather, and horses. Clara froze when she realized she wasn't alone. A tall figure emerged from one of the stalls, a pitchfork in hand. "What in tarnation?" the man began, but Clara cut him off. "Please," she gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "There are men. They're after me. They'll kill me if they find me." The man's expression hardened as he heard the approaching riders. Without hesitation, he took the reins of her horse and led the animal deeper into the stable. "Quick, in here," he whispered urgently, gesturing to an empty stall filled with fresh hay. "Get down and stay hidden." Clara scrambled into the stall, burrowing deep into the hay. The stranger covered her with more hay until she was completely concealed, then positioned himself near the entrance of the stable, casually returning to his chores as if nothing were amiss. Moments later, the thundering hooves came to a halt outside. Clara held her breath, her entire body trembling as she heard men dismounting, their spurs jingling against the hard ground. "You there?" a gruff voice called out. "We're looking for a woman, blonde hair, blue dress. Seen anybody ride by?" From her hiding place, Clara could just make out the silhouette of her protector, tall and broad-shouldered, standing between her and certain death. "Ain't seen nobody," he replied calmly. "Been working in here most of the afternoon. Mind if we take a look around?" another voice demanded. Clara's heart nearly stopped. She could hear footsteps approaching the stable entrance. "Stay quiet," the cowboy whispered, barely audible. "I'll handle this." He stepped forward to block the men's entry. "Now hold on there, fellas. This here's private property. You got no right to come barging in." "Listen, mister," one of the gunmen growled. "That woman's a thief. Stole something mighty valuable from my boss. We just want what's rightfully ours." "Like I said, ain't seen no woman," the cowboy insisted, his voice steady but with an edge of steel beneath it. "And I don't take kindly to armed men threatening to search my property. Whatever business you got with this woman, you can take it elsewhere." There was a tense silence, and Clara could picture the standoff happening just feet away from her hiding place. She pressed a hand over her mouth to silence her ragged breathing. "You sure about that, cowboy?" the first man asked menacingly. "Helping a criminal is a hanging offense in these parts." "So is trespassing," the cowboy replied evenly. "And I count 3 armed men threatening a lone rancher. Sheriff might have something to say about that." Another long, tense pause followed. "We'll be watching the roads," one of the men finally said, "if we find out you're lying." "Good day, gentlemen," the cowboy said firmly. Clara heard the reluctant shuffle of boots, followed by the sounds of men mounting their horses. The hoofbeats gradually faded into the distance, but she remained frozen in her hiding place, afraid to move. "They're gone," the cowboy said after several minutes. "You can come out now." Cautiously, Clara emerged from beneath the hay, brushing strands from her hair and clothes. In the dim light of the stable, she got her first good look at her savior. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps in his late 20s, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and intense green eyes that studied her carefully. His face was tanned and weathered from the sun, but handsome, with a strong jaw and the hint of a beard beginning to shadow his cheeks. "Thank you," Clara breathed, her voice still shaky. I don't know what would have happened if— Are you really a thief?" he interrupted, crossing his arms over his chest. "No," she exclaimed. "Those men are lying. I'm not a thief. I witnessed something I shouldn't have. A murder." The cowboy's expression softened slightly. "I figured as much. Those weren't lawmen. I know the type. My name is Clara Mercer," she offered, extending her hand. "I was on my way to Silver Creek when they spotted me." "Matthew Danner," he replied, taking her hand briefly. "This is my ranch. Small as it is. I'm sorry to bring trouble to your door, Mr. Danner. Call me Matt," he said, moving to peek through the stable door. "And trouble has a way of finding me with or without your help, Miss Mercer." "Clara, please," she insisted. Matt nodded. "Well, Clara, those men may be gone for now, but they'll be back. They didn't strike me as the type to give up easily." "I need to get to the sheriff in Silver Creek," Clara said, wringing her hands. "I saw Jasper Coleman and his men murder the bank manager, Mr. Phillips. They're after a strong box of money that was supposed to arrive on yesterday's stage. When they couldn't find it, they—" Her voice broke as the horrific scene replayed in her mind. "Coleman." Matt's face darkened. "Jasper Coleman's a dangerous man. He owns half the county and thinks he owns the other half too. Then you understand why I need to reach the sheriff immediately." Matt shook his head. "Sheriff Daniels, he's in Coleman's pocket, has been for years." Clara felt the hope drain from her body. "Then what am I supposed to do?" "Those men will kill me if they find me. First thing we need to do is get you somewhere safer than this stable," Matt said decisively. "My house isn't much, but it's better than hiding in hay. Your horse needs rest anyway." He led her out of the stable, keeping to the shadows as they hurried toward the small house nearby. Clara noticed that Matt kept one hand close to the revolver at his hip, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. The house was indeed modest, a simple one-room cabin with a small kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed in one corner, and a stone fireplace. Everything was neat and orderly, if somewhat sparse. "It's not much," Matt said, almost apologetically as he closed and bolted the door behind them. "It's perfect," Clara replied sincerely. She suddenly realized how exhausted she was, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. Matt noticed and guided her to one of the chairs. "Sit before you fall." "When's the last time you ate something?" Clara tried to remember. "Yesterday evening, I think. Everything happened so fast this morning." Matt busied himself at the small stove, heating up a pan. "I've got some beans and bacon. Not fancy, but it'll keep you on your feet." As he prepared the simple meal, Clara studied him discreetly. There was something both hard and gentle about Matthew Danner, the way he moved with quiet confidence, the careful precision of his hands as he worked, the watchful alertness that never seemed to leave him even inside his own home. "How long have you been on this ranch?" she asked, trying to distract herself from the fear that still gripped her. "Going on 3 years now," he replied, stirring the beans. "Was a cattle driver before that. Saved enough to put a down payment on this place. It ain't much land, but it's mine." "You live here alone," a shadow crossed his face. Just me and the horses. I breed and train them for sale." Clara sensed there was more to that story but didn't press. "Those men, Coleman's men, they'll come back, won't they?" Matt set a plate of food in front of her. "Probably. But not tonight. They'll be watching the roads to Silver Creek. By morning, they'll start widening their search." "What am I going to do?" Clara asked, the full weight of her situation crashing down on her again. "I can't stay here and put you in danger, but I can't leave without risking being caught." Matt sat across from her with his own plate. "Eat first, then we'll figure it out. One problem at a time, that's how you survive out here." Clara nodded and took a bite. The simple food tasted better than anything she could remember, and she suddenly realized how ravenous she was. As they ate in companionable silence, the sun disappeared completely beyond the horizon, casting the cabin into darkness save for the warm glow of the oil lamp on the table and the small fire in the hearth. "Where are you from, Clara?" Matt asked finally. "You don't talk like you're from around here." "Boston originally," she replied. "My father was a professor. When he died last year, I came west to live with my aunt in Santa Fe. She's been ill, and I've been helping with her business, a small dress shop." "Long way from Boston to New Mexico territory," Matt observed. Clara smiled sadly. "In more ways than one. But Aunt Vivian is my only family now. When she fell ill, I couldn't let her struggle alone." "And how did you end up witnessing a murder in Coleman's territory?" "I was returning from delivering a special order to a customer in Dry Creek," she explained. "It was early morning and I was passing by the back of the bank when I heard shouting. I should have just kept riding, but I stopped. There was a window partially open and I could hear everything. Mr. Phillips begging for his life, Coleman demanding to know where something was hidden." She shuddered at the memory. "Then there was a gunshot. I must have made a noise because suddenly they were all looking toward the window. I ran to my horse and rode as fast as I could." Matt's expression was grim. "Coleman's been suspected of plenty, but nobody's ever been able to prove anything against him. Witnesses tend to disappear." "Like I will," Clara said quietly. "Not if I can help it," Matt replied firmly, surprising her with the intensity in his voice. "There's a marshal in Santa Fe who's been trying to build a case against Coleman for years. If we can get you to him." Clara asked, looking up at him. "I'm already involved," Matt said with a shrug. "Besides, I've never much liked Jasper Coleman. Man thinks he owns everyone and everything." "Why would you risk your life for someone you just met?" Clara asked, genuinely puzzled. Matt was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames in the fireplace. "Let's just say I've seen what happens when good people do nothing in the face of evil. Not a mistake I aim to make again." There was such weight behind his words that Clara didn't dare ask for clarification. Instead, she simply said, "Thank you, Matt." He nodded once, then stood up. "You should get some sleep. Take the bed. I'll keep watch for a while, then sleep by the fire." "I couldn't take your bed," Clara protested. "You can and you will," Matt said firmly. "No arguing. You've had a harder day than most people have in a lifetime. Rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to get you to Santa Fe." Too exhausted to argue further, Clara gratefully accepted the offer. As she settled onto the narrow bed, she watched Matt check his revolver before sitting in a chair positioned near the window, where he could keep an eye on the approach to the cabin. Despite her fear and the strange surroundings, Clara felt safer than she had all day. As sleep began to claim her, her last thought was of the mysterious cowboy who'd risked everything to help a stranger, and she wondered what kind of man Matthew Danner really was. The sound of a rooster crowing jolted Clara awake. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure of where she was until the events of the previous day came flooding back. She sat up quickly, looking around the small cabin. Morning light streamed through the windows and the smell of coffee filled the air. Matt stood by the stove, his back to her. He changed his shirt and his hair was damp, suggesting he'd already washed up. "Good morning," Clara said, smoothing her rumpled dress self-consciously. Matt turned, a cup of coffee in his hand. "Morning. Thought you might sleep till noon the way you were out." "What time is it?" "Just past 7, he replied, pouring a second cup and bringing it to her. "No sign of Coleman's men yet, but they'll be expanding their search today for sure." Clara accepted the coffee gratefully. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me yet," Matt said grimly. "Getting you to Santa Fe won't be easy. It's a 2-day ride and we'll be crossing Coleman's territory." "We could wait until nightfall," Clara suggested. "Travel under cover of darkness." Matt shook his head. "Too risky. Easy to lose our way and the horses would be more likely to stumble. Besides, Coleman's men know these lands like the back of their hand. Our best bet is to avoid the main roads and cut through the high country." "You've given this some thought," Clara observed. "Didn't sleep much," Matt admitted. "Been working out a route that might keep us clear of trouble." He spread a rough map on the table, pointing out their intended path, a winding route through hills and forests that would add miles to their journey, but keep them away from settlements and major trails where Coleman's men might be watching. "It won't be an easy ride," Matt warned. "Some rough country, but if we push hard we might make Santa Fe by tomorrow night." "I'm not afraid of a difficult journey," Clara assured him. "I'm more worried about what happens if we're caught." "Then we don't get caught," Matt said simply. "I've packed some provisions." "We should leave within the hour." Clara nodded, finishing her coffee. "I should see to my horse." "Already done," Matt said. "Fed and watered both our mounts. Your mare's a fine animal, but she was pushing her limits yesterday. She'll be all right for today's ride, though." "You're very thorough," Clara remarked, impressed by his efficiency. A hint of a smile crossed Matt's face. "Out here, details matter. Being unprepared can get you killed." Clara stood, smoothing her dress again. "Is there somewhere I might freshen up a bit?" Matt pointed to a basin of water he'd set aside. "It's not much, but it's clean. There's a cloth there you can use." He hesitated, then added, "I have a spare shirt if you'd like something different to wear. That dress stands out too much." Clara looked down at her once fine blue dress, now dirty and wrinkled from her flight and hiding in the hay. "You're right. It would make me too easy to spot." Matt rummaged in a trunk and produced a faded red cotton shirt and a pair of canvas trousers that had seen better days. "These might be too big, but—" "They're perfect," Clara said, taking them gratefully. "Would you mind?" "Of course," Matt said quickly, heading for the door. "I'll go check on the horses again. Take your time." Once alone, Clara washed quickly with the basin water, grateful for the chance to remove the dust and sweat from her face and arms. She changed into Matt's clothes, rolling up the sleeves of the shirt and using a piece of rope he'd left as a belt to keep the trousers from falling. The clothes smelled faintly of soap and pine, clean and masculine. When Matt returned a few minutes later, he paused in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he looked at her. "I must look ridiculous," Clara said, suddenly self-conscious. "Not at all," Matt replied, clearing his throat. "Actually, it's practical. You'll blend in better and it'll be easier to ride." He busied himself gathering the last of their supplies, avoiding her gaze in a way that made Clara wonder what he was thinking. There was something about Matthew Danner that intrigued her, a complexity beneath his quiet, capable exterior. "Is there anything I can do to help?" she asked. "You can braid your hair," he suggested. "Tuck it up under this." He handed her an old, wide-brimmed hat. "From a distance, you might pass for a young man. Could buy us some time if we're spotted." Clara nodded and quickly plaited her long blonde hair, coiling it on top of her head and securing it before putting on the hat. "Better." Matt studied her for a moment, then nodded. "It'll do." "We should get moving." Outside, the morning was bright and clear, the sky a brilliant blue that seemed to stretch endlessly over the rugged landscape. Two horses stood saddled and ready, Clara's chestnut mare and Matt's sturdy black gelding. As Clara mounted, she noticed that Matt had tied a rifle to his saddle in addition to the revolver at his hip. He saw her looking and said simply, "Precaution." They set off at a steady pace, heading northeast toward the distant hills. Matt led the way, occasionally glancing back to check on Clara, but otherwise focused on the trail ahead and the surrounding landscape, ever vigilant for signs of pursuit. For the first hour, they rode in silence, the only sounds the steady rhythm of hooves and the occasional call of a bird overhead. As they began to climb into more rugged terrain, Matt finally spoke. "Your aunt in Santa Fe, will she be worried about you?" Clara had been so focused on escaping Coleman's men that she hadn't given much thought to her aunt. "She'll be concerned when I don't return as expected, but she's used to my deliveries, sometimes taking an extra day if weather delays me. And the dress shop is successful." Clara smiled, grateful for the distraction of conversation. "Modestly so. Aunt Vivian has built a reputation for quality work. Ladies from all over the territory come to her for special occasions, weddings, christenings, society events." "And you help with the sewing?" "I do," Clara confirmed. "I've always had a knack for it. My mother taught me when I was young, before she passed." Matt glanced back at her. "You've lost both your parents then?" Clara nodded. "My mother when I was 12 to influenza. My father last year, his heart gave out suddenly." "I'm sorry," Matt said softly. "And you?" Clara asked. "Do you have family?" A shadow passed over Matt's face. "Not anymore." Something in his tone suggested the topic was painful, so Clara didn't press. Instead, she asked, "How did you come to be a horse trainer?" This brought a genuine smile to Matt's face. "Always had a way with horses, even as a boy. My father was a blacksmith, so I grew up around them. After the war, I drifted west, worked as a cowhand, then a cattle driver, saved every penny until I could buy my own place." "The war," Clara echoed. "You fought in the Civil War," Matt nodded. "Union Army. I was young, enlisted at 17, saw things no boy should see." That explained some of the shadows she occasionally glimpsed in his eyes. "Is that why you came west, to leave those memories behind?" "Partly," Matt admitted. "But mostly I came looking for something I couldn't find back east." "And what was that?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Space to breathe, room to build something that was mine alone." Clara understood that sentiment. After her father's death, the familiar streets of Boston had felt suffocating, filled with memories and expectations she couldn't fulfill. Coming west had been terrifying but liberating, a chance to reinvent herself away from the pitying glances of her father's colleagues and her mother's friends. "I understand," she said simply. Matt glanced back at her, genuine surprise in his expression, as if he hadn't expected her to comprehend. For a moment, their eyes met, and Clara felt an unexpected connection with this quiet, serious man who had risked his safety for a stranger. The moment was broken by the distant sound of a gunshot. Matt reined in sharply, raising a hand for Clara to stop. "Could be hunters," Clara whispered hopefully. Matt shook his head. "No hunting grounds in that direction." He dismounted quickly. "We need to move off this trail. Now." They led their horses into a dense copse of trees, moving as quietly as possible deeper into the cover of the forest. Matt tied the horses to a low branch, then motioned for Clara to stay put while he crept back toward the edge of the trees to scout. Clara's heart pounded as she waited, straining to hear any sound of approaching riders. When Matt finally returned, his expression was grim. "4 riders about half a mile back. They're following our trail. Coleman's men. Can't be sure at this distance, but who else would be tracking us?" Clara felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. What do we do now? Matt thought for a moment. There's a creek about a quarter-mile ahead. If we can reach it, we can ride in the water for a while to break our trail. And if they catch up to us before then. Matt's hand moved to his revolver. Let's make sure that doesn't happen. They mounted again and moved carefully through the trees, staying off the main trail. Matt led them on a winding path, occasionally doubling back or taking seemingly random turns. Clara realized he was deliberately laying a confusing trail for their pursuers to follow. When they reached the creek, Matt instructed Clara to ride downstream for several hundred yards before they emerged on the opposite bank. The cold water splashed up to their knees as the horses picked their way carefully along the rocky creek bed. "This should buy us some time," Matt said as they finally left the water and continued their journey. "But we need to move faster now. They'll figure out what we've done eventually." They pushed their horses harder as the terrain grew increasingly rugged, climbing higher into the hills. By midday, the sun beat down mercilessly, and both riders and mounts were beginning to tire. "We need to rest the horses," Matt finally said, pointing to a small clearing sheltered by large boulders. "Just a short break." They dismounted, and Matt led the horses to a tiny spring bubbling from between the rocks. As the animals drank, Clara stretched her aching muscles. She was no stranger to long rides, but the combination of stress, fear, and the pace Matt had set was taking its toll. "Are you holding up all right?" Matt asked, offering her his canteen. "I'm fine," Clara assured him, taking a grateful sip of water. "Just a little saddle sore." Matt nodded approvingly. "You ride well. Most city women I've known would be complaining by now." "I'm not most city women," Clara replied with a small smile. "No," Matt agreed, his gaze lingering on her face. "You're certainly not." There was something in his voice that made Clara's heart beat a little faster. She looked away, suddenly flustered. "How much farther until we're out of Coleman's territory?" she asked, changing the subject. "Another few hours," Matt replied, scanning the horizon. "Once we cross the ridge ahead, we'll be in disputed land, technically part of the Montoya Grant, but Coleman's been trying to claim it for years. And then to Santa Fe. We'll need to find somewhere to spend the night," Matt said. "There's an old line shack I know of, used it once during a blizzard. It's not much, but it's shelter." Clara nodded, trying not to think about what spending the night alone with Matthew Danner might entail. He had been nothing but respectful and proper, yet she couldn't deny there was something between them, a tension, an awareness that seemed to grow stronger with each passing hour. "We should move on," Matt said abruptly, as if reading her thoughts. "I don't like being exposed like this." They continued their journey, climbing higher into the hills. The trail narrowed, sometimes disappearing entirely, forcing them to pick their way carefully along rocky slopes and through dense stands of pine. Matt seemed to know exactly where he was going, navigating with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with the land. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, and the air had grown heavy with the promise of rain. "Storm's coming," Matt observed grimly. "We need to reach that shack before it hits." They pushed harder, the horses straining as the trail grew steeper. Just as the first fat raindrops began to fall, Matt pointed ahead to a small, dilapidated structure nestled among the trees. "There it is." They urged their tired horses forward, reaching the line shack just as the skies opened up. Dismounting quickly, Matt led the horses to a lean-to attached to one side of the small building while Clara hurried inside. The shack was simple, one room with a small fireplace, a rough-hewn table with a single chair, and a narrow cot in one corner. It was dusty and clearly long abandoned, but it was shelter from the storm that now raged outside. Matt joined her a few minutes later, water streaming from his hat and coat. "Horses are settled," he reported, removing his dripping hat. "Found some old feed that's still good enough. They'll be fine." "And what about our pursuers?" Clara asked anxiously. "This storm's a blessing in disguise," Matt said, moving to the fireplace to see if it was usable. "It'll wash away whatever tracks we left. They'd be fools to continue searching in this weather." He bent down to examine the fireplace, nodding with satisfaction when he found it intact and a small stack of firewood nearby. Within minutes, he had a small fire crackling, the warm glow illuminating the dim interior of the shack. Clara stood awkwardly, unsure what to do with herself in the confined space. She was suddenly acutely aware of how alone they were miles from anywhere, with only the sound of the rain on the roof and the crackle of the fire to break the silence. "You should get out of those wet clothes," Matt said matter-of-factly, not looking at her as he rummaged through his saddlebags. "I have a dry blanket you can wrap up in while your things dry." Clara felt her cheeks flush. I'll be fine." Matt looked up at her, his expression serious. "You'll catch your death if you stay in wet clothes all night. I'll step outside while you change." "But it's pouring rain," Clara protested. "The lean-to has enough of a roof," Matt insisted, handing her a thick woolen blanket from his pack. "I need to check on the horses anyway." Before she could argue further, he'd grabbed his hat and ducked outside again, leaving Clara alone in the small shack. Reluctantly, she removed the sodden shirt and trousers, hanging them near the fire to dry. Wrapped in the blanket, which smelled of horse and leather and faintly of Matt himself, she sat on the edge of the cot, waiting for his return. When Matt finally came back in, he'd removed his own wet coat and outer shirt, wearing only a thin undershirt that clung to his broad shoulders. He stopped short when he saw Clara sitting there, wrapped in the blanket with her bare shoulders exposed, her damp hair loose and falling around her face. I should have brought you something else to wear," he said, his voice rough. "It's fine," Clara assured him. "The blanket is warm. And my clothes should dry quickly by the fire." Matt nodded, turning away to busy himself with his saddlebags again. He produced some jerky and hardtack along with a small flask. "Not much of a dinner," he apologized, setting the meager provisions on the table. "But it'll keep us going." They ate in silence, the storm continuing to rage outside. The small shack creaked and groaned with each gust of wind, but the roof held, and the fire provided much-needed warmth and light. "Tomorrow we should reach Santa Fe by nightfall," Matt said eventually, breaking the awkward silence. "The marshal there, James Burke, is a good man. He'll protect you while you give your statement about what you witnessed." Clara nodded, wondering what would happen after that. Would she simply return to her aunt's shop and resume her life as if nothing had happened? The idea seemed impossible now. "What will you do?" she asked quietly. "After you've delivered me safely." Matt stared into the fire, his profile illuminated by the dancing flames. "Go back to my ranch, I suppose, try to make up for lost time." "You've sacrificed so much to help me," Clara said. "Your work, your safety." "It's the right thing to do," Matt said simply. "Still, I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Matt looked at her then, his green eyes intense in the firelight. "You don't owe me anything, Clara." Something in the way he said her name made her breath catch. The small space suddenly seemed even smaller, the air between them charged with an unspoken tension. "I should get some rest," Matt said abruptly, breaking the moment. "And so should you. Tomorrow will be another long day." He gestured to the cot. "You take the bed, I'll sleep by the fire." "Matt," Clara began, not sure what she wanted to say. "Get some sleep, Clara," he said softly. "You're safe tonight." As she lay on the narrow cot, listening to the rain and the occasional rumble of thunder, Clara found herself thinking not of the danger they'd escaped, or what awaited them in Santa Fe, but of the enigmatic man who slept just a few feet away, a man who'd risked everything for a woman he barely knew, asking nothing in return. Sleep came eventually, but her dreams were filled with green eyes and the memory of Matt's voice saying her name. The storm had passed by morning, leaving behind a washed, clean world that glistened in the early sunlight. Clara awoke to find Matt already up, tending to the horses outside. Her clothes had dried overnight and she dressed quickly, braiding her hair and tucking it under the hat again before stepping outside. "Morning," Matt greeted her, looking up from where he was checking his gelding's hooves. "Sleep well. Better than I expected," Clara admitted. "Any sign of trouble?" Matt shook his head. "All quiet, and with the ground wet like this, we should be able to move without leaving much of a trail." They ate a quick breakfast of the remaining hardtack, then saddled the horses and set off. The day was clear and cool after the storm, the air fresh and pine-scented as they made their way down from the hills. "We'll skirt around the Fernandez settlement," Matt explained as they rode. "It's too risky to go through there. Coleman has friends in town." Clara nodded, following his lead as they navigated the rugged terrain. As they rode, Matt began pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the land. They passed through an old Spanish mission now in ruins, a valley where a famous battle had taken place during the Mexican-American War, a strange rock formation that local tribes considered sacred. Clara found herself captivated not just by the tales themselves, but by the way Matt told them with reverence for the land and its history, and with an eloquence she wouldn't have expected from a man who seemed so taciturn at first meeting. "You know so much about this territory," she remarked after he finished describing how early Spanish settlers had built irrigation channels that were still in use. Matt shrugged. "I like to know the story of the land I live on. Seems only respectful." "It's more than that," Clara observed. "You love it here." Matt was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "I do. There's a freedom here you can't find back east. Room to breathe. Room to become who you're meant to be, not who others expect you to be." "Is that who you are now?" Clara asked. "Who you were meant to be?" The question seemed to catch Matt off guard. "Still working on that, I suppose," he admitted. "What about you? Is running a dress shop in Santa Fe what Clara Mercer was meant for?" Now it was Clara's turn to consider. "I don't know," she said honestly. "After my father died, I felt lost. Coming west was a way to escape that feeling, but sometimes I wonder if I'm just postponing the inevitable question of what I really want." "And what do you want?" Matt asked, his voice gentle. Clara looked out at the vast landscape stretching before them, wild, untamed, full of danger but also possibility. "I want to build something that's mine, something that can't be taken away." Matt nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then maybe you're in the right place after all. The West has a way of testing you, stripping everything down to what really matters." They fell into a comfortable silence as they continued their journey, each lost in their own thoughts. By midday, they'd covered significant ground, and Matt pointed to a distant smudge on the horizon. "Santa Fe. We should reach it by sunset if we keep up this pace." Clara felt a curious mix of relief and disappointment. Soon she would be safe, but her time with Matthew Danner would come to an end. The thought left her with an unexpected ache. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they stopped to rest the horses near a small stream. Clara knelt to splash cool water on her face while Matt stood watch, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "We've been lucky so far," he said. "No sign of Coleman's men." "Do you think they gave up?" Clara asked hopefully. Matt shook his head. "Men like that don't give up. More likely they lost our trail in the storm and are searching in the wrong direction, but we still need to be careful." As if his words had somehow tempted fate, the distant sound of hoofbeats reached their ears. Matt tensed immediately, his hand going to his revolver. "Get on your horse," he ordered quietly. "Now." Clara obeyed without question, mounting quickly while Matt checked his rifle. The hoofbeats were growing louder, coming from the direction they'd been heading. "Into those trees," Matt directed, pointing to a dense stand of pines nearby. "Quick and quiet." They guided their horses into the cover of the trees just as 4 riders came into view. From their hiding place, Clara could see them clearly, and her heart sank as she recognized 2 of the men who had chased her from the bank. "It's them," she whispered. "Coleman's men." Matt nodded grimly. "They must have figured out we're heading for Santa Fe and cut across country to intercept us." The riders slowed as they approached the stream, one of them dismounting to examine the ground. "Fresh tracks," he called to the others. "They were here not 10 minutes ago." Clara felt fear close her throat. They were trapped. The open country behind them would offer no cover if they tried to flee, and the men would surely hear them if they attempted to move deeper into the trees on horseback. Matt leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "When I create a distraction, I want you to ride for Santa Fe. Don't stop for anything." "What? No," Clara whispered back fiercely. "I won't leave you." "This isn't a debate," Matt said firmly. "You're the witness. You need to reach the marshal." Before Clara could protest further, Matt had dismounted and was moving stealthily through the trees, his rifle in hand. She watched in horror as he positioned himself behind a large boulder, took careful aim, and fired a shot that kicked up dust several yards from the gunmen. Instantly, the men scattered, diving for cover and drawing their weapons. Matt fired again, this time clipping the hat off one of the men. "Run," he shouted to Clara. "Go now." Heart pounding, Clara dug her heels into her horse's sides, bursting from the trees and galloping toward Santa Fe. Behind her, she heard more gunshots and shouting. Tears blurred her vision as she rode, the thought of Matt facing 4 armed men alone nearly unbearable. She'd gone perhaps half a mile when her conscience got the better of her. She couldn't leave him, not like this. Pulling hard on the reins, she wheeled her horse around and galloped back toward the sound of gunfire. As she approached, she could see that Matt had managed to drop one of the gunmen, but he was now pinned down behind the boulder with the remaining 3 closing in on his position. Without thinking, Clara drew the small derringer she kept hidden in her boot, a gift from her aunt who insisted no woman should travel unarmed, and fired a shot into the air. The unexpected gunfire from a new direction momentarily confused the gunmen, who turned to locate this new threat. Matt seized the opportunity to take aim at another of Coleman's men, his shot finding its mark. The man fell with a cry, clutching his shoulder. The remaining 2 men, now facing attacks from 2 directions, began to retreat toward their horses. One of them spotted Clara and raised his gun, but before he could fire, Matt's rifle cracked again, and the man dropped his weapon with a howl of pain, his hand shattered. The last gunman, seeing his companions disabled, decided discretion was the better part of valor. He leapt onto his horse and galloped away, leaving his wounded comrades behind. Matt emerged from his cover, his expression thunderous as he strode toward Clara. "I told you to ride for Santa Fe. I couldn't leave you to die," Clara replied, dismounting to face him. "That was my choice to make." Matt snapped, his face flushed with anger and something else Clara couldn't quite identify. "Do you have any idea what would have happened if they'd killed you? Everything would have been for nothing." "And what about you?" Clara demanded, her own temper flaring. "Did you think I could just ride away knowing you might die because of me?" They stood toe to toe, both breathing hard, the adrenaline of the gunfight still coursing through their veins. For a moment, Clara thought Matt might continue shouting, but instead, he did something that shocked her completely. He kissed her. His hands came up to frame her face, and his lips met hers with an urgency that took her breath away. Clara froze for an instant, then melted into the kiss, her arms winding around his neck as she responded with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing even harder than before. Matt rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I thought I was going to lose you," he murmured, "when I saw that gun pointed at you." "Now you know how I felt," Clara replied softly, "riding away thinking you might die." Matt opened his eyes, looking down at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Clara," a groan from one of the wounded gunmen interrupted whatever he had been about to say. The moment broken, Matt stepped back, his expression becoming businesslike again. "We need to deal with them," he said, nodding toward the injured men. "Then get to Santa Fe before that last one brings reinforcements." They bound the wounded men's injuries as best they could, then secured them with rope from Matt's saddlebags. The one Matt had shot in the shoulder, a man Clara recognized as the leader of the group that had chased her, initially glared at them with undisguised hatred. "Coleman will hunt you to the ends of the earth for this," he spat. "He can try," Matt replied evenly. "But first he'll have to explain to a federal marshal why he ordered the murder of a bank manager." They left the men tied to a tree, knowing that their companion would likely return for them once he was sure it was safe. Then they mounted up and rode hard for Santa Fe, the events of the gunfight and what had followed hanging unspoken between them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the lights of Santa Fe appeared before them, a welcome sight after their harrowing journey. They slowed their tired horses to a walk as they entered the outskirts of town. "The marshal's office is on the plaza," Matt said, guiding them through the narrow streets. "Burke should still be there at this hour." The town was busy with evening activity saloons doing brisk business, families finishing late errands, vendors packing up their market stalls. No one paid much attention to the dusty, trail-worn pair as they made their way to the central plaza. The marshal's office was a solid adobe building with the territorial flag flying outside. A lantern burned in the window, indicating someone was indeed still there. They dismounted, tying their horses to the hitching post. Before they could enter, however, Matt placed a hand on Clara's arm. "About what happened back there," he began, his voice low. Clara felt her heart quicken. "You mean when you kissed me?" A faint smile touched Matt's lips. "Yes, that. Do you regret it?" Clara asked, suddenly uncertain. "No," Matt said firmly. "I don't, but the timing wasn't ideal." Clara couldn't help but laugh softly. "I think that's something of an understatement." Matt's smile widened. "When this is over, when you're safe and Coleman is facing justice, I'd like to talk about whatever this is between us." "I'd like that too," Clara said softly. Matt reached out, his hand gentle as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "For now, let's get you to the marshal." Inside, they found James Burke, a tall, lean man with iron-gray hair and keen blue eyes, reviewing wanted posters at his desk. He looked up as they entered, his expression shifting from mild curiosity to sharp interest as he took in their disheveled appearance. "Can I help you folks?" he asked, setting aside his papers. "Marshal Burke," Matt said. "My name is Matthew Danner. This is Clara Mercer. She witnessed Jasper Coleman murder the bank manager in Dry Creek 2 days ago. We've come to you because the local sheriff is in Coleman's pocket." Burke's eyebrows rose, but he betrayed no other surprise at this dramatic declaration. Instead, he stood and gestured to the chairs across from his desk. "Miss Mercer, Mr. Danner, please sit down. I believe we have a lot to talk about." Over the next hour, Clara recounted everything she had witnessed at the bank. while Matt explained their subsequent flight from Coleman's men, including the confrontation that had occurred just hours earlier. Marshal Burke listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions but never once expressing doubt about their story. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "I've been trying to build a case against Coleman for years," he confirmed. "But witnesses have a way of disappearing or changing their stories when it comes time to testify. Your account, Miss Mercer, could finally be what we need to bring him to justice." "What happens now?" Clara asked. "I'll send telegrams tonight to the territorial governor and the federal district court," Burke explained. "By morning, I'll have authorization to arrest Coleman and his men. In the meantime, you both need somewhere safe to stay." "My aunt has a shop in town," Clara said. "Mercer's Fine Apparel on Guadalupe Street." Burke shook his head. "That's the first place Coleman's men would look for you. No, I have a better idea. My sister runs a small boarding house on the outskirts of town. Few people know of my connection to her, and she's discreet. You'll be safe there until I can arrange proper protection." Matt and Clara exchanged a glance, both too exhausted to argue. "That sounds perfect," Matt said. "Thank you, Marshal." Burke stood. "I'll take you there myself. And tomorrow, we'll begin the process of bringing Jasper Coleman to justice." An hour later, Clara found herself in a small but comfortable room in Flora Burke's boarding house. The older woman, who shared her brother's shrewd eyes and no-nonsense manner, had provided them with hot meals and promised baths would be ready shortly. Matt had been given a room across the hall, and Clara could hear him moving about as she sat on the edge of her bed, finally allowing herself to believe they had made it, they were safe. A soft knock at her door roused her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Matt standing there, his hair damp from a recent bath, wearing clean clothes that Flora had found for him. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right," he said. "It's been a long few days." "I'm fine," Clara assured him, "just processing everything that's happened." Matt nodded. "I understand. I should let you rest." But neither of them moved, both reluctant to end the moment. "Matt," Clara said softly, "thank you, not just for saving my life but for believing me when I told you what I'd seen, for risking everything to help me." "You're worth risking everything for, Clara Mercer," Matt replied, his voice low and sincere. The intensity in his green eyes made her breath catch. Without thinking, Clara reached up and placed her hand against his cheek. Matt caught her hand in his, turning it to place a gentle kiss against her palm. "We should talk tomorrow," he said, his voice husky, "when we're both rested." Clara nodded, though what she wanted more than anything was to pull him into her room and continue what they'd started during that moment of relief and passion after the gunfight. "Good night, Matt," she whispered instead. "Good night, Clara," he replied, releasing her hand reluctantly. "Sleep well." As Clara closed her door and prepared for bed, she realized that despite the danger they still faced, she felt more alive than she had in years. Whatever happened with Coleman and the case against him, something had changed within her during these past 2 days, something that had everything to do with the quiet, brave man across the hall. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and baking bread wafting up from Flora Burke's kitchen. After washing and dressing in clothes, the boarding house keeper had lent her a simple but well-made blue skirt and white blouse. She made her way downstairs. Matt was already at the breakfast table, deep in conversation with Marshal Burke. Both men looked up as she entered, and Clara didn't miss the way Matt's gaze lingered, his eyes warming as they took in her appearance. "Good morning, Miss Mercer," Burke greeted her. "I trust you slept well." "Better than I expected," Clara admitted, taking the seat across from Matt. "Any news?" I received responses to my telegrams early this morning, Burke said, pouring her a cup of coffee. The governor has authorized Coleman's arrest, and a federal judge is being dispatched from Denver to oversee the case. That's wonderful news, Clara said, relief washing over her. Indeed, Burke agreed. I'm assembling a posse of men I trust implicitly. We'll ride for Coleman's ranch this afternoon. I'm coming with you, Matt said firmly, in a tone that suggested this wasn't the first time he'd made this declaration that morning. Burke frowned. As I've already explained, Mr. Danner, this is a federal matter now. You've done your part by bringing Miss Mercer safely to me. Coleman's men know my face, Matt argued. They'll be watching for me. You could use that to your advantage. Clara listened to their debate with growing concern. The thought of Matt riding into more danger made her heart clench painfully. Gentlemen, she interrupted, what about me? What am I supposed to do while you're confronting Coleman? You'll stay here with Flora, Burke said. Once we have Coleman in custody, I'll send for your aunt. Until then, it's safer if no one knows your whereabouts. Clara wanted to protest, to insist that she had as much right to see this through as Matt did, but she knew the marshal was right. Her testimony would be crucial in the case against Coleman. She couldn't risk her safety now. After breakfast, while Burke went to organize his posse, Clara found herself alone with Matt in Flora's small garden behind the boarding house. The morning sun bathed everything in golden light, and for a moment, it was hard to believe that just yesterday they had been fighting for their lives. You don't have to go with them, Clara said quietly, watching as Matt checked and cleaned his revolver. You've already done more than enough. Matt looked up at her, his expression serious. I need to see this through, Clara, not just for you but for myself as well. What do you mean? Matt was silent for a long moment, his hand stilling on his weapon. 3 years ago, when I first bought my ranch, Coleman tried to force me to sell it to him, said it was part of his grazing land. When I refused, his men burned my barn with all my breeding stock inside. Clara gasped softly. That's terrible. I rebuilt, Matt continued. Started over, but I never forgot, never stopped watching my back. Men like Coleman think they can take whatever they want, hurt whoever gets in their way with no consequences. So this is personal for you, Clara said, understanding dawning. Matt nodded. I won't deny it, but it's more than that. It's about what's right, about standing up when it would be easier to look away. He looked at her intently. That's why I helped you from the beginning. Not just because you were in danger, but because what you were doing standing up to Coleman, being willing to testify against him, it mattered. Clara moved closer to him, her hand coming to rest on his arm. Just promise me you'll be careful. She hesitated, then continued softly. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you. Matt's expression softened, and he set his revolver aside to take both her hands in his. Clara, when this is over, when Coleman is behind bars and you're safe, I'd like to court you properly. If you'll allow it. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. I'd like that very much, Matthew Danner. A small smile curved his lips. Even though I'm just a horse trainer with a small ranch miles from anywhere, especially because of that, Clara replied sincerely. You're the most honorable, brave man I've ever known. Matt leaned forward then, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was gentler than their first but no less meaningful. Clara responded in kind, her hands moving to his shoulders as he pulled her closer. They broke apart at the sound of a throat clearing. Marshal Burke stood in the doorway, his expression a mixture of amusement and impatience. If you're still determined to join us, Danner, we're assembling at the office in an hour, he said. Matt nodded, his cheeks slightly flushed. I'll be there. After Burke left, Clara and Matt shared a glance that was equal parts embarrassment and amusement. Well, Clara said, At least now the marshal knows your motivation for wanting to see this through." Matt laughed, the sound warm and rich. "I suppose he does." His expression grew serious again. "I have to go get ready, but I'll come back to you, Clara. I promise." Clara nodded, trying to ignore the knot of fear in her stomach. "I'll hold you to that promise, Cowboy." The next few hours passed agonizingly slowly for Clara. From the window of her room, she watched as Matt rode away with Marshal Burke and a dozen other men, their determined expressions visible even from a distance. Flora tried to distract her with conversation and household tasks, but Clara's thoughts remained with the posse heading toward Coleman's ranch. By evening, anxiety had Clara pacing the small confines of her room. The rational part of her mind knew that even if the arrest went smoothly, it would take time for the posse to return to Santa Fe. But as darkness fell and there was still no word, her imagination conjured increasingly dire scenarios. It was nearly midnight when she heard horses approaching the boarding house. Clara rushed downstairs, heedless of the fact that she was dressed only in her nightgown with a shawl hastily thrown over her shoulders. Marshal Burke entered first, his expression weary but satisfied. "It's done, Miss Mercer. Coleman is in custody along with most of his men. They're locked up tight in the territorial prison awaiting the judge's arrival." "And Matt?" Clara asked anxiously, looking past the marshal to the door. "Where is Matt?" "Right here," came the familiar voice as Matt stepped inside, removing his hat. Clara's heart leapt at the sight of him, dusty, tired, with a bruise darkening his left cheekbone, but gloriously, wonderfully alive. Without thinking, she crossed the room and threw her arms around him, burying her face against his chest. Matt's arms came around her immediately, holding her tight. "I told you I'd come back," he murmured against her hair. "Was anyone hurt?" Clara asked, pulling back to examine his bruised face. "Nothing serious," Burke answered for him. "Coleman's men didn't put up much of a fight once they realized they were outnumbered and outgunned. Your cowboy here got that bruise when one of them tried to make a run for it." "You should see the other fellow," Matt said with a small smile. Flora appeared from the kitchen with coffee and food for the returning men. As they ate, Burke explained what had happened. "Coleman was surprised, to say the least," he recounted. "Thought himself untouchable. When I told him we had an eyewitness to Philip's murder, he actually laughed, said no witness would dare testify against him. His face when Burke mentioned your name was quite something to behold," Matt added. "I think he genuinely couldn't believe you'd made it to Santa Fe alive." "What happens next?" Clara asked. "The judge arrives day after tomorrow," Burke explained. "He'll hear your testimony and determine if there's enough evidence to send Coleman to trial. In the meantime, I've sent for your aunt. She should arrive tomorrow afternoon." Clara nodded, relief washing over her. It was really happening. Coleman would face justice for his crimes, and the nightmare of the past few days would soon be behind her. Later, after Burke had left and Flora had retired for the night, Clara and Matt sat together on the small porch of the boarding house. The night was cool but not cold, the sky ablaze with stars. "What will you do now?" Clara asked softly. "Will you go back to your ranch?" "Eventually," Matt replied, "but first I need to testify at Coleman's hearing, and there's something else I need to take care of in Santa Fe." He turned to look at her, his expression gentle in the moonlight, or someone, rather. Clara felt her heart quicken. "Oh, and what might that entail?" "Well," Matt said thoughtfully, "I believe I mentioned something about courting you properly. That usually involves things like dinner at a nice restaurant, walks in the plaza, perhaps a ride in the countryside that doesn't involve being chased by gunmen." Clara laughed softly. "That does sound preferable." Matt's hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers warm and calloused as they entwined with her own. "I know it's fast, Clara. We've known each other less than a week, but these past few days, they've felt like a lifetime." "I know exactly what you mean," Clara whispered. "When you're fighting for your life alongside someone, you see who they truly are. There's no time or room for pretense." Matt nodded. "And what I've seen in you is someone brave and principled. Someone who wouldn't abandon a stranger even when it meant risking her own safety. Someone I could care for very deeply." The hesitation in his voice told Clara that he'd almost said something else, something stronger than care for. The thought made her breath catch. "I feel the same way," she admitted, "and I'd very much like to see where this might lead." Matt's smile in the moonlight was like a gift. "Then that's what we'll do." The next day brought the arrival of Clara's Aunt Vivian, a formidable woman in her 50s with Clara's same blonde hair, now streaked with silver, and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. After an emotional reunion with her niece, Vivian turned her penetrating gaze on Matt. "So you're the cowboy who saved my Clara," she said, sizing him up. "He is," Clara confirmed, smiling at Matt's obvious discomfort under Aunt Vivian's scrutiny. Vivian murmured. "Well, young man, it seems I owe you a debt of gratitude." "No debt, madam," Matt said politely. "Anyone would have done the same." "That," Vivian said firmly, "is where you are quite wrong. Most men would have sent her on her way the moment they realized the danger. You, Mr. Danner, are clearly not most men." She nodded once, as if confirming something to herself. "You must join us for dinner this evening. I've taken rooms at the hotel on the plaza much more comfortable than this establishment, though I'm sure Mrs. Burke does her best." And that was that. By evening, Clara found herself seated at a fine restaurant with her aunt and Matt, the latter looking somewhat uncomfortable in his best shirt and jacket. "Mr. Danner," Vivian said as they enjoyed their meal, "Clara tells me you raise and train horses on your ranch." "Yes, madam," Matt confirmed. "Mostly quarter horses for working cattle, but I've been experimenting with some finer bloodlines for riding stock as well." "Fascinating," Vivian said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but. "And is this enterprise profitable?" "Aunt Vivian," Clara chided, embarrassed by the direct question. "It's a fair question," Matt said with a small smile. "And the answer is yes, madam, it is. Not enough to make me a wealthy man, but I do well enough. The ranch is paid for, I have savings set aside, and my reputation for quality horses grows each year." Vivian nodded approvingly. "Good. I have no patience for men who cannot support themselves through honest work." She fixed Matt with a keen look. "And what are your intentions toward my niece, Mr. Danner?" "Aunt Vivian," Clara exclaimed, mortified. Matt, however, seemed to have expected the question. "With your permission, Mrs. Mercer, I would like to court Clara properly. We've come to care for each other under unusual circumstances, I grant you, but my feelings are sincere." Vivian studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Well, at least you're direct. I appreciate that in a man." She turned to Clara. "And you, my dear, what are your feelings in this matter?" Clara met her aunt's gaze steadily. "I care for Matt very much, Aunt. I would like the opportunity to see where these feelings might lead." Vivian sighed. "Very well. I suppose I should be grateful you found a man with both courage and principles. Those are rare enough qualities these days." She fixed Matt with another stern look. "You have my blessing to court my niece, Mr. Danner, but understand this: if you hurt her in any way, there will be consequences." "I understand completely," Matt said seriously. The judge arrived from Denver the following day, and the hearing was scheduled for the morning after. Clara spent the day with Aunt Vivian, explaining everything that had happened in greater detail. Matt, meanwhile, met with Marshal Burke to prepare his own testimony. That evening they walked together in the plaza, enjoying a rare moment of peace amidst the bustle of the town. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Matt asked as they strolled beneath the cottonwood trees. "A little," Clara admitted. "Not about testifying, I know what I saw, but about facing Coleman again." Matt squeezed her hand reassuringly. "He can't hurt you now. Burke has deputies watching him day and night, and I'll be right there in the courtroom with you." Clara smiled up at him. "My protector to the end, always," Matt replied, his voice low and serious. The hearing the next morning was a tense affair. The territorial courthouse was packed with spectators eager to see the notorious Jasper Coleman brought to justice. Coleman himself sat at the defendant's table, flanked by deputies, his cold eyes fixed on Clara as she took the stand. But with Matt's steady gaze encouraging her, Clara told her story clearly and confidently, recounting exactly what she had seen and heard that morning at the bank. When Coleman's lawyer attempted to discredit her testimony, suggesting she had mistaken what she'd witnessed, Clara remained firm. "I know what I saw, sir," she said clearly. "Mr. Coleman shot Mr. Phillips in cold blood when he wouldn't reveal the location of the money. There is no possibility of mistake." Matt testified next, describing how Clara had come to his ranch fleeing for her life, and the subsequent pursuit and attacks by Coleman's men. His calm, straightforward account seemed to impress the judge, who listened attentively throughout. By the end of the day, the judge had heard enough. He ruled that there was more than sufficient evidence to bind Coleman over for trial on charges of murder, attempted murder, and various other crimes. The trial would begin in 30 days, and until then, Coleman would remain imprisoned. As they left the courthouse, Clara felt as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "It's really over," she said wonderingly. "Almost," Matt corrected gently. "The trial is still ahead, but yes, the worst is behind us." That evening they celebrated with Aunt Vivian and Marshal Burke at the hotel restaurant. As they enjoyed their meal, Burke raised his glass in a toast. "To justice," he said, "and to brave witnesses who make it possible." They all drank to that, and then Vivian raised her own glass. "And to unexpected meetings that lead to unexpected journeys." Clara caught Matt's eye over her glass, and the warmth in his gaze made her cheeks flush. Later, Matt walked Clara back to her aunt's rooms at the hotel. Outside her door, he took both her hands in his. "I need to return to my ranch tomorrow," he said. "There's work waiting that can't be put off any longer." Clara nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Of course. You've already sacrificed so much time." "I was wondering," Matt continued, his voice slightly hesitant, "if you might consider coming to visit in a week or so. I'd like to show you my home properly this time, not just as a place to hide from gunmen." Clara smiled. "I'd like that very much." "And perhaps," Matt added, his voice dropping lower, "your aunt might consider coming as well, for propriety's sake, of course." "Of course," Clara agreed, her smile widening. "I'm sure she could be persuaded." Matt's hands tightened on hers. "Clara, I know it's only been a short time, but these past days have shown me what kind of woman you are. Brave, principled, kind. I've never met anyone like you." "Nor I you," Clara replied softly. "Most men would have sent me on my way the moment trouble appeared at their door. But you risked everything to help me, a complete stranger." "Not a stranger anymore," Matt murmured, drawing her closer. "Not by a long shot." His kiss was tender and full of promise, a different kind of promise than the desperate embrace they'd shared after the gunfight, but no less meaningful. When they parted, Clara's heart was racing. "1 week," she said. "I'll come to your ranch in 1 week." True to her word. 7 days later, Clara found herself once again on the road to Matt's ranch, this time seated comfortably in a rented buggy beside her aunt, rather than fleeing for her life on horseback. The journey brought back vivid memories, But as they crested the final hill and Matt's ranch came into view, Clara felt only anticipation rather than fear. Matt was waiting for them, standing on the porch of his small house. As they pulled up, Clara could see the changes he'd made in their absence: fresh paint on the house, newly planted flowers along the walkway, the stable door repaired and repainted. "He's been busy," Aunt Vivian observed dryly. "I wonder for whose benefit all this sprucing up might be." Clara felt her cheeks warm but didn't respond as Matt approached to help them down from the buggy. "Welcome to Danner Ranch," he said, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. "Properly this time." The next 3 days were some of the happiest of Clara's life. Matt showed them every aspect of his operation: the breeding program he was developing, the training methods he used, his plans for expansion. Clara was impressed by his knowledge and passion, and even Aunt Vivian seemed begrudgingly approving. In the evenings, they sat on the porch watching the sunset, talking long into the night. Vivian, surprisingly, often excused herself early, giving them time alone together. During these quiet moments, Clara and Matt shared their histories, their hopes, their dreams for the future. On their final evening, after Vivian had retired to the small guest room Matt had prepared, they walked together under the stars to the corral where several of Matt's prized horses dozed in the moonlight. "I've been thinking," Matt said, leaning against the fence rail, "about what comes next." "And what have you concluded?" Clara asked, standing close beside him. "Coleman's trial is in 3 weeks, Matt said. After you testify and he's convicted, what then? Will you go back to Santa Fe, to your aunt's shop?" Clara had been pondering the same question. "I'm not sure. I love my aunt dearly and I'm grateful for all she's done for me. But, Matt prompted gently. "But I've changed," Clara admitted. "These past weeks have shown me something about myself, about what I'm capable of, about what I truly want." "And what is that?" Matt asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara turned to face him fully, gathering her courage. "I want a life that's truly mine, not one borrowed from my aunt out of gratitude or inherited from my parents out of duty. I want—" She hesitated, then continued. "I want a partner to build that life with, someone who sees me for who I am, not who they expect me to be." Matt's eyes seemed to glow in the moonlight as he stepped closer. "Clara Mercer," he said, taking her hands in his. "From the moment you burst into my stable, covered in dust and terror, you've been unlike any woman I've ever known. These past weeks have only confirmed what I suspected from the beginning, that you are extraordinary. Brave, yes, but also kind, intelligent, determined." He took a deep breath. "I know it's fast, too fast perhaps, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Clara's heart raced as she watched him sink to one knee before her, still holding her hands. "I love you, Clara. Will you marry me? Will you build your life here with me?" Tears sprang to Clara's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Matt, I love you too." His smile was radiant as he rose and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion and tenderness that had been building between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "Your aunt may well murder me in my sleep for proposing so quickly," he murmured. Clara laughed softly. "Actually, I think she's been expecting it. Why else would she conveniently retire early every evening? A wise woman, your aunt," Matt said with a grin. "Should we tell her now, or wait until morning?" "Morning," Clara decided. "Tonight is just for us." 3 months later, on a perfect autumn day, Clara stood in the small church in Silver Creek, her aunt fussing with the train of her simple white gown. Through the window, she could see guests arriving: Marshall Burke and his sister Flora, neighbors from surrounding ranches, and friends from Santa Fe who had made the journey. Jasper Coleman was serving a life sentence in the territorial prison. His reign of terror finally ended. Clara's testimony had been the cornerstone of the case against him, but other witnesses had come forward as well once they realized it was safe to do so. The town of Dry Creek was slowly rebuilding under new leadership, free from Coleman's shadow. "Are you ready, my dear?" Aunt Vivian asked, adjusting Clara's veil one final time. "More than ready," Clara replied, her heart full. As she walked down the aisle toward Matt, handsome in a new suit with a wildflower in his lapel, Clara thought of the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun in terror hiding in a stable while gunmen searched for her had transformed into the greatest love she had ever known. Matt's eyes were bright with emotion as she reached him, and when he took her hand in his, she knew with absolute certainty that this was where she belonged. "I love you," he whispered just for her as the preacher began the ceremony. "I love you too, Cowboy," Clara whispered back. "Always." 5 years later, Clara stood on the porch of the ranch house, much expanded now from the small cabin. It had once been watching as Matt taught their 3-year-old son Michael to sit on his first pony. Their daughter Emma, just beginning to toddle, clutched at Clara's skirt while baby James slept peacefully in her arms. The ranch had prospered under their joint care. Clara had put her business sense and design skills to work, helping Matt develop a thriving enterprise selling not just quality horses, but also custom saddles and tack that she designed herself. Their reputation had spread throughout the territory and beyond, bringing customers from as far away as California and Texas. Aunt Vivian, now in her 60s but still formidable, had relocated to the ranch as well, occupying a comfortable cottage nearby. She divided her time between doting on her great-nieces and nephew and running a small but exclusive dressmaking business from her new home. "Look, Mama," Michael called excitedly as the gentle pony walked in a circle with Matt leading it. "I'm riding." "I see you, darling," Clara called back. "You're doing wonderfully." Matt looked up at her, his face glowing with pride and love. Even after 5 years of marriage, that look still made Clara's heart skip a beat. He was as handsome as the day they'd met, perhaps even more so now that contentment and happiness had softened the hard edges that life had once carved into him. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant golds and reds, Clara thought back to that fateful day when she had fled for her life and found, against all odds, not just safety but the greatest love she could have imagined. "What are you thinking about?" Matt asked as he joined her on the porch later, after the children were asleep. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close against his side. "I was thinking about the day we met," Clara replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "About hiding in your stable, terrified while you faced down Coleman's men." "Stay quiet, I'll handle this," Matt quoted with a small smile. "Little did I know what I was getting myself into." Clara laughed softly. "Do you ever regret it, getting involved in my troubles?" "Not for a single moment," Matt said firmly, turning her to face him. "Everything I have that matters, you, our children, this life we've built together, all of it came from that moment when you burst into my stable." "Sometimes I think about how differently things could have gone," Clara mused. "If I'd ridden in a different direction that day, if you'd turned me away." "But you didn't, and I couldn't," Matt said simply. "Some things are just meant to be, Clara. We were meant to find each other, meant to build this life together." As he bent to kiss her, Clara knew he was right. Their beginning may have been unusual, fraught with danger and desperation. But the love that had grown from those harrowing days was the most real, most precious thing she had ever known. From the stable where they had hidden from gunmen to the thriving ranch and family they had created together, their journey had been extraordinary, and it was only just beginning.